The period from 2017 to 2021 marked a tumultuous chapter in American political life, beginning with Donald Trump's presidency in January 2017. His tenure was immediately defined by contentious policies, polarizing rhetoric, and actions that would profoundly influence the lives of people of color and veterans in the United States. This narrative recounts the events, gestures, and policies of the Trump presidency, drawing primarily on accounts from mainstream journalism and official White House statements. What follows is a comprehensive exploration of how Trump's administration interacted with these two vital groups, highlighting both the systemic challenges faced and the responses elicited from the communities affected. This story is structured into several theme sections. First, it examines the historical context that set the stage for the issues at hand. Then it chronicles the unfolding of major events and decisions from 2017 through 2021. And finally, it evaluates the long-lasting impact of these actions on the nation's minority communities and veterans. Through an analysis of official statements and news reports from multiple perspectives, we aim to provide a balanced and nuanced view of one of modern America's most debated presidential legacies. The theme of reconciliation follows. Exploring various attempts to bridge divides deepened during this period. Grassroots movements emerged, aiming to foster dialogue and understanding among historically marginalized communities. Although these initiatives often encountered significant resistance, they also sparked important discussions about identity, race, and the shared future of a diverse nation, a necessity in light of the historical context that shaped these interactions. Transitioning into the 2022 section, we delve into the public discourse ignited by the challenges that followed these pivotal years. Scholars and activists argue that the legacy of these events continues to shape America's political landscape, presenting both opportunities for growth and potential for further conflict. Civic engagement campaigns began to emerge, educating citizens about their voting rights and the importance of participation in democratic processes. These efforts highlighted the voices of young leaders, often from underrepresented communities, who played crucial roles in advocating for change, from local elections to national movements. In assessing the impact on minority communities, it is essential to recognize the resilience displayed throughout this time. Profiles of individuals whose stories exemplified courage and determination emerged as symbols of hope and progress. Their contributions, whether through art, community service, or political activism, illuminated the path toward a more inclusive society. Such narratives serve to remind us that while the challenges faced were significant, the responses generated by these communities were equally powerful, creating ripples of change that inspired future activists. Finally, the narrative closes with reflections on the ongoing discourse around national identity in light of these historical moments. Discussions surrounding patriotism, inclusive narratives, and the reinterpretation of what it means to be an American are prevalent. Voices advocating for a more equitable representation in history continue to challenge established norms, emphasizing that understanding our past is crucial for forging a united future. As we look forward, it becomes clear that the legacies of the recent past are not just historical footnotes, but vital threads in the ever-evolving tapestry of American society. America's history intertwines with tales of struggle, resilience, and controversy. Issues of race and the state's treatment of people of color have deep historical roots, as have the challenges faced by veterans returning from duty after every modern conflict. Long before Donald Trump's presidency, these groups often found themselves at the intersection of policy, public action, and social justice struggles. Over the decades, movements have risen to champion the rights of marginalized communities and advocate for change. The civil rights movement of the 1960s, a seismic force in America's societal landscape, exemplified this struggle as activists demanded equality, justice, and an end to segregation. Figures like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X emerged as beacons of hope and determination, igniting a fire that inspired generations to advance the cause of social equity. Their legacies remind us that the fight for rights is an ongoing journey, where victories are won only through persistence and solidarity. Similarly, the plight of veterans returning home from wars reveals a different yet equally crucial layer of American struggle. Many veterans face profound challenges reintegrating into civilian life, grappling with physical and mental health issues, including PTSD. Advocacy groups have emerged to support these individuals, emphasizing the need for comprehensive health care, job training, and mental health services. The stark contrast between their sacrifices and the support received upon returning home highlights a societal inconsistency that demands attention. Today, in an era marked by polarizing politics and social media activism, these historical undercurrents continue to shape contemporary America. The Black Lives Matter movement has brought renewed focus to systemic racism, prompting immediate dialogues about police reform, equity in education, and economic opportunities. Simultaneously, advocacy for veterans' rights has garnered more visibility, navigating through legislative channels to enact policies aimed at providing better resources and benefits for those who have served. As citizens engage in grassroots organizing, strive for inclusivity, and demand accountability from their leaders, the narrative of struggle and resilience remains at the forefront. America's history is not merely a record of events, but a living tapestry woven from the threads of many voices, challenges, and triumphs. It serves as a reminder that solidarity and action are essential in the ongoing quest for justice, creating a fabric that reflects the nation's highest ideals while acknowledging its historical flaws. Moreover, younger generations have stepped forward, driven by an unwavering passion for reform. They engage deeply in discussions about climate change, racial justice, and economic inequality, bringing fresh perspectives that challenge the status quo. This infusion of youth energy revitalizes long-standing movements, while inspiring seasoned activists to reconsider their approaches. In this interplay, mentorship flourishes, creating a cyclical exchange of knowledge that enriches the tapestry of civic engagement and advocacy. Moreover, the younger generations have stepped forward, driven by a relentless passion for reform. They engage deeply in discussions about climate change, racial justice, and economic inequality, bringing fresh perspectives that challenge the status quo. This infusion of youth energy revitalizes long-standing movements and inspires seasoned activists to reconsider their approaches. In this interplay, mentorship flourishes, creating a cyclical exchange of knowledge that enriches the tapestry of civic engagement and advocacy. As this collective consciousness grows, it becomes evident that the fight for justice is not a solitary endeavor, but a shared journey. Coalitions form across diverse demographics, uniting individuals who may have previously seen their struggles as isolated. This newfound solidarity manifests in collaborative efforts, from community gardens addressing food deserts to joint fundraisers supporting local initiatives. Every act of cooperation strengthens the foundation of civil society and highlights the importance of interconnectedness in the pursuit of a more just future. Yet amidst the triumphs, challenges persist. The road to lasting change is often fraught with obstacles, systemic barriers that require not just grassroots action, but also policy reform at the highest levels. Citizens continue to lobby for transparency, fairness, and representation in government. Advocacy organizations work tirelessly, drafting legislation that holds leaders accountable and elevates the voices of marginalized populations. As they push for reforms, the civic landscape undergoes an evolution that encompasses not only activist engagement, but also greater accountability from those in power. Ultimately, this ongoing narrative, marked by struggle, cooperation, and unwavering hope, reminds us that the journey towards justice is a marathon, not a sprint. Each generation carries the torch, illuminating the path forward, ensuring that future citizens inherit a world where inclusivity is not just an aspiration, but a reality. As this living tapestry continues to expand, it is up to all of us, as stewards of society, to weave new threads of resilience and commitment, fostering a legacy that will inspire and empower years to come. In this climate of collective activism, it becomes evident that the stories of individuals, whether they relate to race or military service, are intrinsically linked. Each narrative adds to the broader fight for a more equitable society, ensuring that the struggles faced are neither forgotten nor overlooked. As citizens continue to unite across various causes, history will not only remember those who fought for change, but also the resilience of communities that came together to envision a brighter future for all. For people of color, the legacy of slavery, segregation, and systemic racism created a complex social framework in which discriminatory policies and cultural narratives would often dictate the pace of progress or regression. By the time Trump stepped into office, decades of civil rights activism had transformed many aspects of American society, though not without significant backlashes. Mainstream media outlets, including the New York Times, Washington Post, and CNN documented ongoing issues from racial profiling to police violence, often amplifying voices demanding reform. Veterans, on the other hand, have traditionally been revered in American life as symbols of sacrifice and patriotism. Yet issues of access to health care, adequate support for mental health, and bureaucratic challenges in obtaining benefits have persisted over many years. White House briefings during previous administrations noted that while honor was due, many veterans found themselves struggling to receive proper treatment upon returning home. Against this historical backdrop, Trump's four-year presidency would either be seen as a continuation of long-standing American challenges or as a drastic departure from established political norms. With a focus on personal gestures, policy decisions, and the cultural tone set by the administration, this narrative provides a chronological exploration of events and their long-term significance. In January 2017, when Donald Trump was inaugurated as the 45th President of the United States, the nation braced itself for significant policy shifts. Trump's personal approach, marked by a flair for dramatic rhetoric and the use of social media, immediately influenced the tone of his presidency. From the outset, his statements on race and immigration triggered debates that resonated in every corner of the country. One of the administration's first controversial moves was the implementation of a travel ban, ostensibly aimed at protecting American national security. Early reports in major newspapers such as the Washington Post and CNN highlighted that the ban was widely interpreted as targeting predominantly Muslim nations, many of whose citizens are people of color. Critics argued that the travel ban exemplified an exclusionary approach to governance, while supporters within the White House lauded it as a necessary measure to safeguard the interests of American citizens. As the travel ban sparked widespread protests across the country, advocacy groups quickly mobilized to challenge its legality. Numerous lawsuits were filed in federal courts, arguing that the ban violated constitutional rights and principles of equal protection under the law. These legal battles drew national attention, as individuals from various cultural backgrounds shared their stories of hardship and fear, deepening public discourse on immigration and identity in America. Amid this tumultuous backdrop, discussions in Congress intensified, with some lawmakers pushing for reforms that would create a more inclusive immigration system. Town hall meetings around the country became hotbeds of debate, as constituents voiced their concerns over national security and human rights, often at odds with one another. The polarization of opinions was further exacerbated by the echo chambers of social media, where misinformation spread like wildfire. In response to the backlash, the administration sought to clarify its stance, emphasizing that the travel ban was merely a precursor to a broader overhaul of immigration policies aimed at better vetting procedures. Officials pointed to a series of reported incidents, claiming that stronger measures were necessary to prevent entry from regions associated with terrorism. However, the discourse often overlooked the contributions of immigrants to American society, from cultural enrichment to economic growth. As public sentiment ebbed and flowed, the travel ban soon became a litmus test for candidates in the upcoming midterm elections. Candidates were compelled to take a definitive stance, with those opposing the ban gaining traction among younger, more diverse voter bases. Grassroots movements gained momentum, amplifying voices that called for compassion and understanding rather than fear and division. The narrative surrounding the travel ban thus evolved, reflecting broader issues of race, identity, and the future direction of the nation. In schools and communities, educators and activists began utilizing the debate as a teaching moment, emphasizing the importance of empathy and critical thinking in fostering informed citizens. Workshops and seminars on immigration rights proliferated, aiming to dismantle stereotypes and encourage solidarity across different communities. As the conversation shifted from confrontation to understanding, hopes grew that the nation could move toward a more just and inclusive future. At official press conferences, senior White House officials contended that the ban was solely about security and was not motivated by entrenched racial animosity. Yet numerous statements from Trump himself, delivered both in speeches and on Twitter, often employed language that many interpreted as divisive. Reports from mainstream media emphasized discrepancies between the administration's official rhetoric and the personal tone of the president's communications. As public opinion began to shift, protests erupted across the nation, drawing thousands to the streets. Demonstrators held signs emblazoned with messages of solidarity, chanting slogans that emphasized inclusivity and diversity. Social media played a crucial role in mobilizing these movements, with hashtags trending globally as individuals shared their stories and experiences. Critics of the ban argued that it not only targeted specific nationalities, but also perpetuated a broader fear-mongering narrative that equated immigrants with threats to national safety. In response, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle sought to address the growing unrest. Some moderate Republicans, worried about their constituents' reactions, began voicing their dissent, urging the administration to reconsider its stance. Meanwhile, Democratic leaders capitalized on this division, framing the ban as an affront to American values and advocating for comprehensive immigration reform that prioritized human rights and humanitarian concerns. Amidst the turmoil, a series of legal challenges emerged, with various advocacy groups filing lawsuits claiming that the ban violated constitutional protections. Lower courts granted temporary injunctions, allowing for a reprieve for those affected as the legal battles unfolded. The situation drew the attention of civil rights organizations, which rallied support nationwide, emphasizing the importance of judicial oversight in protecting individual freedoms. As the debate intensified, family members of individuals affected by the ban took to the media to share their heart-wrenching stories. These personal narratives served as poignant reminders of the human impact behind political decisions, showcasing the resilience of those who faced uncertainty and fear. Through interviews, they highlighted the aspirations that brought them to the U.S., ultimately painting a picture of hope amidst adversity. Amid the cacophony of voices, some unexpected alliances emerged. Business leaders and tech giants, traditionally aligned with the Republican Party, began to voice their concerns about the implications of the ban on the workforce and innovation. They argued that a diverse pool of talent was essential for driving economic growth and maintaining the competitive edge of the United States in the global market. This added an economic dimension to the debate, drawing attention to the ramifications of such policies on future generations. As the story continued to evolve, it became clear that the repercussions of the ban extended far beyond legal and political boundaries. It sparked a national dialogue about identity, belonging, and the very fabric of society. Through heated debates, personal stories, and shifting political landscapes, the nation grappled not only with its values and ideals, but also with the need for a cohesive narrative that acknowledges both diversity and unity in this complex, interconnected world. Additionally, alongside these attempts to connect with veterans, Trump's administration introduced several policies aimed at reforming the VA, including efforts to reduce wait times for medical appointments and expand access to private healthcare options. Proponents of these policies argued that they were necessary steps for modernizing the system and providing veterans with the care they deserved. Yet opponents cautioned that such privatization might lead to a reduction in the quality of care and undermine the integrity of the VA as a dedicated service for veterans, raising critical questions about the best approach to caring for those who have served. Moreover, alongside these attempts to connect with veterans, Trump's administration introduced several policies aimed at reforming the VA, including a focus on reducing wait times for medical appointments and expanding access to private healthcare options. Supporters of these policies argued that they were necessary steps in modernizing the system and providing veterans with the care they deserved. Yet opponents cautioned that such privatization might lead to a reduction in the quality of care and undermine the integrity of the VA as a dedicated service for veterans. The controversy surrounding these policies sparked intense discussions within both political spheres and veteran communities. Town hall meetings hosted by veteran advocacy groups became hotbeds for expression, where veterans shared their experiences, some praising the changes while others expressed deep disillusionment. These divergent views illustrated the complexity of the issues at hand and highlighted the emotional stakes involved, as many veterans felt that their well-being hinged on government decisions. As a result, the narrative surrounding veterans affairs became somewhat polarized, drawing in politicians, activists, and the general public. Social media platforms became avenues for veterans to voice their opinions and rally support, leading to campaigns aimed at holding elected officials accountable. With the impending election cycles, both major political parties recognized the need to address these concerns, with candidates vying to present comprehensive plans that would resonate with the veteran population. In this climate of scrutiny and accountability, various nonprofit organizations stepped up to fill the gaps left by the government. Programs offering mental health support, job training, and legal assistance emerged as vital resources for veterans navigating the challenges of post-service life. These initiatives, often funded by donations and volunteer work, represented a grassroots effort to improve the lives of those who had served, emphasizing the resilience and resourcefulness of the veteran community. An example of how local efforts can make a significant impact in the lives of individuals facing systemic challenges. Ultimately, as political dynamics evolved and new leadership emerged, the dialogue surrounding Veterans Affairs remained critical. The ongoing discussion served as a reminder of the sacrifices made by service members and the continuous need for policies that genuinely reflect their needs and aspirations. With the collective voices of veterans, advocates, and citizens, there was hope that meaningful change could be achieved, ensuring that the promises made were kept and that veterans received the respect and support they deserved. As March 2017 rolled in, the Trump administration began to roll out policies that had direct implications for people of color. The travel ban that targeted nations primarily in the Middle East and North Africa was put into effect shortly after inauguration. Trump's public statements couched the decision in terms of national security. However, many in the political and journalism spheres saw it as part of an ongoing pattern of exclusion. On multiple occasions, leaders of minority communities responded vehemently. Rallies, protests, and op-eds appeared almost simultaneously, reflecting a pervasive sentiment of alienation and injustice. For instance, the New York Times and Reuters detailed numerous accounts in which families were separated at U.S. borders or faced uncertainty as immigration policies shifted rapidly under a new doctrinal framework. Moreover, Trump's approach to race was characterized by unilateral tweets and public statements that often contradicted the official language emerging from the White House. While his top advisors maintained that the policies were purely security-oriented, critics saw a dissonance between intention and effect, a gap that consistently fed the narrative of neglect toward communities of color. Throughout 2017 and 2018, stories of discrimination, visa denials, and tightened border controls were extensively covered by mainstream media, which stressed the disconnect between official justifications and the lived realities of those affected. Simultaneously, the Trump administration made efforts to cultivate an image that honored American veterans. In 2017, the president participated in several public ceremonies and visited veterans' hospitals and memorials. Official White House releases described these visits as heartfelt tributes and symbols of a commitment to those who served. In addition to these visits, the administration also launched several initiatives aimed at improving the lives of veterans. One notable program was the expansion of access to healthcare services, which focused on reducing wait times at VA facilities. This effort included increasing funding for mental health resources and ensuring that veterans had timely access to specialized care for conditions such as PTSD. Furthermore, the administration emphasized the importance of employment for veterans, unveiling a series of partnerships with private corporations to facilitate job training and placement programs. These initiatives were portrayed as pivotal steps toward reintegrating veterans into civilian life, recognizing the unique skills and discipline that service members possess. Despite these commitments, the administration faced criticism from various veteran advocacy groups. Critics argued that while the public displays of support were commendable, tangible results were lacking. They underscored the need for sustained attention to systemic issues, such as homelessness among veterans and the complexities within the healthcare system that continued to hinder access to essential services. As the administration navigated these challenges, the narrative surrounding veteran affairs became a focal point in the broader conversation about national identity and the country's responsibility to honor those who served. Public discussions began to emphasize not only the need for recognition, but also for action, transforming promises into effective policies that could genuinely uplift the veteran community. Ultimately, the legacy of the administration's approach to veterans could hinge on its ability to balance symbolic gestures with substantive policy changes, ensuring that America's commitment to its heroes was reflected not just in words, but in meaningful, lasting improvements in their lives. This requires a concerted effort to not only acknowledge the sacrifices made by these individuals, but also to address the multifaceted challenges they face upon returning to civilian life. Issues such as mental health support, job placement services, housing stability, and access to quality healthcare must be tackled with the same urgency as national defense. Moreover, engaging veterans themselves in discussions about their needs and desires can foster innovative solutions that truly resonate. It is crucial that the administration's measures go beyond generic solutions and are tailored to meet the diverse experiences of veterans from all walks of life, ensuring that their voices are not just heard, but actively shape the policies that affect them. By intertwining honor with action, the government can move toward a more profound respect for those who have served, transforming the narrative from a mere commemoration of service to a robust and actionable framework for support and empowerment. Yet for many veterans and veterans advocacy groups, the story was more complicated. Media reports published by outlets such as USA Today and military-focused publications noted that while ceremonial events were celebrated, systemic issues persisted. Problems with the Veterans Affairs administrative processes, delays in care, and frustrations over funding and oversight continued to plague many veteran communities. Some former military personnel felt that the gestures of respect were not matched by a reassessment of policies that had left them without adequate support. A particularly illustrative example was the controversy surrounding the VA's appointment of leadership officials. When criticisms of mismanagement arose, some veterans questioned whether the administration was genuinely committed to reform or primarily interested in symbolic displays of patriotism. Critics argued that while Trump's personal interactions with veterans made headlines, the structural problems at the VA demanded a depth of policy response that was not forthcoming. As the debates intensified, many advocacy groups began mobilizing, seeking to hold the administration accountable for its promises. They organized rallies and campaigns aimed at highlighting not just the need for better healthcare services, but a comprehensive overhaul of the bureaucratic processes that often left veterans feeling neglected. Forums were held across the country where veterans shared their personal stories of struggle and resilience, demanding actionable solutions rather than empty rhetoric. The issue of accessibility also came to the forefront, with countless veterans voicing concerns over long wait times for appointments and inadequate facilities. Critics argued that the administration's failure to address these systemic issues revealed a disconnect between the leadership's priorities and the lived experiences of those they aimed to serve. Many veterans reiterated that true reform should extend beyond superficial gestures to meaningful legislative change that prioritizes funding for both mental and physical health services. In response, some members of Congress introduced bipartisan legislation intended to streamline processes and allocate additional resources to the VA. This garnered mixed reactions. While some veterans hailed it as a step in the right direction, others expressed skepticism, fearing that without continued pressure and advocacy, any reforms might falter or be diluted over time. Moreover, the political landscape continued to evolve, with upcoming elections placing renewed scrutiny on veteran issues. Candidates were urged by their constituents to prioritize veteran affairs as a pivotal part of their platforms, igniting discussions about potential candidates' commitment to genuinely improving conditions within the VA. Ultimately, the controversy surrounding the VA's leadership appointments became a microcosm of the larger debate about how best to serve those who have served the nation. It illuminated the critical need for ongoing engagement, oversight, and advocacy to ensure that promises translate into reality while fostering a broader national conversation about veterans' rights and the obligations of the federal government to uphold them. As the nation approached its midterm elections, the policies and gestures of the Trump administration, especially regarding race and veteran affairs, became a focal point of intense debate. The media, political commentators, and grassroots activists scrutinized every decision, using mainstream news channels to dissect the administration's actions. As public discourse intensified, many voters found themselves more engaged than ever before. Town hall meetings filled beyond capacity as citizens sought to voice their concerns, particularly regarding issues of systemic racism and the treatment of military veterans. Activists rallied, organizing marches and campaigns that were designed to amplify the voices of those who felt marginalized under the current administration's policies. Social media became a vital platform for these grassroots movements, where hashtags promoting equality and support for veterans trended nationally, driving significant attention to these critical issues. In response, some Republicans attempted to distance themselves from controversial policies, emphasizing how their initiatives proposed economic growth and job creation. Yet this strategy often backfired, as constituents demanded accountability and clarity in addressing the real-life consequences of enacted laws. The divide within the party deepened, with moderate members urging for a more inclusive approach that could salvage voter trust ahead of the elections. On the Democratic side, various candidates emerged, each promising progressive solutions while leveraging the discontent among the electorate. Many took aim at not only the administration's handling of racial equity in veteran affairs, but also scrutinized broader societal issues such as healthcare, education funding, and environmental policies. Their platforms highlighted a clear juxtaposition to the administration's legacy, aiming to resonate with an increasingly diverse voter base that demanded substantive change. As the election drew nearer, debates in town halls turned into flashpoints for passionate discussions, with both sides entrenched in their positions. Various groups began to mobilize for voter registration drives, ensuring that disenfranchised populations could exercise their rights at the polls. In this charged atmosphere, the rhythm of the campaign season unfolded, with each new revelation or policy decision swiftly dissected and debated, ensuring that the stakes for the midterms had never been higher. Throughout 2018, Trump's rhetoric remained a consistent source of contention. In interviews and speeches at campaign rallies, he occasionally made references to law and order as a justification for stringent immigration policies. Some of these comments were interpreted as implicitly racial in nature. Reports by CNN and the Los Angeles Times documented instances where local leaders and community organizers condemned the language used by the president as inflammatory and divisive. The administration's policies on immigration continued to evolve. Subsequent iterations of border control measures, such as the construction of physical barriers and enhanced surveillance protocols, were widely publicized. News organizations such as Reuters provided detailed timelines that juxtaposed official White House statements, asserting that these actions were necessary for national security, with testimonies from immigrant families and advocacy groups detailing feelings of fear, isolation, and discrimination. Amid these tensions, reports emerged implicating policy decisions that adversely affected minority communities. Editorials in various newspapers underscored that the narrative of protection was at odds with the impact on non-white populations. Protest marches and community forums in cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York became common, emphasizing the demand for clarity and fairness in the government's treatment of all Americans, regardless of race or national origin. In response to these growing demands, grassroots organizations mobilized to unify voices across various marginalized groups, forming coalitions that spanned different racial and ethnic backgrounds. These alliances sought to address not only the immediate concerns regarding discriminatory policy, but also to lay the groundwork for long-term systemic change. Community leaders called for the formation of independent oversight committees to monitor policy impacts and ensure accountability in decision-making processes. The media became a pivotal player in amplifying these discussions, highlighting personal testimonies of those affected by policies that not only misrepresented their experiences, but also perpetuated cycles of disadvantage. Stories of families displaced by urban redevelopment projects, children facing underfunded schools in predominantly minority neighborhoods, and individuals struggling with access to healthcare became focal points in news coverage, fostering empathy and broader public engagement with these issues. As these movements gained momentum, politicians from both sides of the aisle began to take notice. A few progressive lawmakers began to advocate for comprehensive reforms aimed at dismantling institutional barriers faced by minority communities, proposing legislation that included equitable funding for education, healthcare accessibility, and housing protections. However, they faced significant resistance from conservative factions who argued that such initiatives would overreach state powers and impose undue burdens on taxpayers. Despite this pushback, the combination of public pressure and advocacy efforts led to a series of town hall meetings where constituents could voice their concerns directly to elected officials. These events attracted not only local residents, but also activists and analysts who sought to put forth evidence-based arguments regarding the impacts of inequality and systemic discrimination. Some representatives, recognizing the vitality of engaging with their constituents, began to shift their viewpoints, fostering a more constructive dialogue focused on shared solutions. Meanwhile, community-led initiatives took root, with various groups developing educational programs aimed at raising awareness about civil rights and citizenship among younger generations. Workshops on advocacy, legal rights, and voter registration became staples in community centers, helping empower residents to take an active role in the political process. The hope was to cultivate a sense of agency within communities that had long been marginalized, encouraging greater participation in elections and local governance. As the national discussion evolved, it became increasingly evident that the quest for justice and equity transcended individual policy topics. Citizens began to recognize their interconnectedness, realizing that issues of race, economic status, and social justice were deeply intertwined. The shared experience of struggle sparked a resurgence of activism reminiscent of the civil rights movements of the past, with a younger generation taking up the mantle, determined to challenge the status quo and create a more inclusive society for all. While immigration policy drew significant attention, issues related to veterans were equally pressing in many communities. The administration's efforts to honor veterans included high-profile visits and the promotion of entrepreneurship programs tailored for veterans. Many of these initiatives received positive coverage in mainstream outlets, showcasing stories of individual veterans overcoming adversity with government-sponsored business development programs. However, behind the glossy portraits of empowered veterans, investigative reports from the Washington Post, Politico, and specialized veterans organizations uncovered persistent challenges. Reports detailed bureaucratic mismanagement within the VA, delays in processing claims, and a lack of accountability for systemic failures. Some veterans felt that the policy promises, though well-meaning in ceremonies and publicity campaigns, did not translate into meaningful improvements in quality of life or healthcare provision. Many veterans reported feeling lost in a labyrinth of paperwork, unsure of the very benefits they had fought for. A survey conducted by the American Legion revealed that nearly 60% of respondents experienced difficulties in accessing mental health services, highlighting a dire need for reform in this critical area. Moreover, those in rural areas struggled more significantly, often facing long travel times to the nearest facility, leading to missed appointments and deteriorating conditions. Advocacy groups sprang into action, amplifying the voices of veterans who felt unheard, while also organizing rallies to demand transparency and tangible action from lawmakers. Grassroots campaigns focused on pushing for legislative changes that could streamline the claims process and improve the quality of care provided. In a notable case, the Veterans Healthcare Eligibility Reform Act received renewed support from bipartisan groups, illustrating that the plight of veterans could unite disparate political factions in pursuit of a common cause, a rare moment of collaboration in an often polarized political landscape. As veterans continued to share their stories, a movement gained momentum, one that emphasized not just accountability within the VA, but a broader societal recognition of the sacrifices made by service members. Community organizations began establishing local support networks, connecting veterans with resources and offering peer support initiatives. These local efforts proved vital, creating a sense of camaraderie and belonging that many veterans desperately sought after their return to civilian life. With this shifting landscape, a new generation of veterans stepped forward, using social media platforms to share their experiences and advocate for change. Their digital presence became a powerful tool for mobilization, attracting attention from mainstream media and policymakers alike. They created hashtags like Veterans Voices and Real Veteran Experience, which began trending, allowing narratives that had long been overlooked to capture the nation's attention. As more individuals engaged in these conversations, the fabric of public understanding began to change. Society slowly started recognizing that being a veteran involved ongoing challenges that extended far beyond military service. People began to open their eyes to the psychological toll of warfare, the difficulties of reintegration, and the systemic obstacles that hindered access to essential services. While challenges remained, the resilience and advocacy of veterans, combined with increased public awareness, paved the way for potential reform. Progress may have been slow, but it was undeniably underway, driven by a collective commitment to ensure that the promises made to those who served were not just words spoken at ceremonies, but commitments upheld through action and solidarity. In several instances during the latter part of 2018 and into early 2019, meetings between veteran advocacy groups and White House officials turned contentious as delegates pressed for reforms that would address decades-old issues. Despite assurances from officials that changes were imminent, many veterans continued to report frustrations on the ground. The dual narrative of grand gestures and entrenched problems remained a defining characteristic of the administration's handling of veteran affairs. Over time, the treatment of people of color under Trump's presidency became a microcosm of broader societal divisions. While official policy documents and White House statements maintain that all changes were made with national security and economic prosperity in mind, personal interactions and community responses often painted a different picture. One notable incident occurred in mid-2018 when, during a heated town hall meeting in a diverse urban neighborhood, Trump made a series of off-the-cuff remarks which many perceived as dismissive of local concerns. Detailed in reports by ABC News and NBC, the remarks were interpreted by critics as undermining the lived realities of minority communities. These events only deepened the sense of disconnect between the government and those it vowed to protect. In parallel, several policy decisions echoed historical practices of exclusion. The administration's decisions regarding refugee admissions and the suspension of certain humanitarian visas were widely reported as part of a broader pattern damaging to people of color. Though White House officials defended these measures citing threats of terrorism and national security, many community leaders argued that the policies merely revived strategies reminiscent of a less tolerant past. In a parallel narrative, some supporters of the administration argued that Trump was fulfilling his electoral mandate and that his stringent policies were misinterpreted by critics with ulterior motives. Opinion pieces in both right-leaning and centrist publications highlighted the argument that the measures were necessary to maintain law and order, a perspective that, while popular among some segments of the population, stood in stark contrast to the lived experiences of many minority families. In cities across the nation, discussions in community centers, churches, and schools re-examined what it meant to be a citizen in a time of heightened polarization. Social media platforms, forums, and local newspapers provided ample space for dissenting voices and thoughtful commentary, highlighting both the hopes and the anger of those negatively impacted by the administration's policies. By the close of 2019, the discourse around race in America had become deeply entrenched, with many calling for a reconciliation of America's past injustices and its present realities. As the Trump presidency moved into its final years, the challenges faced by veterans remained a persistent issue. While interviews and public engagements highlighted the administration's commitment to honoring military service, behind-the-scenes concerns about the quality and accessibility of veteran care continued to resonate. In late 2019, a series of investigative reports published by military advocacy groups and major news networks exposed ongoing deficiencies in the VA system. The stories recounted long wait times for medical appointments, increasing rates of veteran suicides, and a slow pace of bureaucratic reform. These reports were met with both shock and criticism from political opponents, who accused the administration of favoring short-term political gains over long-term structural reform. The White House responded by pointing to measures that had been implemented to address these issues. A series of new initiatives aimed at modernizing IT systems, decentralizing the claims process, and increasing accountability through external audits. Press releases from the administration claimed that veteran care was undergoing an historic transformation and that improvements were visible for those who sought help. Yet on the ground, the transformation was uneven. Veterans continued to report that access to mental health services and critical care remained a challenge, prompting ongoing debates in both Capitol Hill and local communities. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic further complicated an already strained system. Veteran hospitals and clinics found themselves navigating unprecedented pressures, compounded by budgetary constraints. News outlets such as NPR and the Associated Press chronicled stories of veterans who struggled to receive care during the pandemic, stories that underscored the need for comprehensive reform. The administration, facing simultaneous political and public health crises, was forced to reconcile its symbolic gestures of honor toward veterans with the harsh reality of a system under strain. Personal narratives emerged that underscored both triumph and despair. In interviews with local veterans organizations, many service members shared accounts of administrative errors that had delayed treatments, juxtaposed with moments of recognition and gratitude during public appearances with the president. The duality of these accounts was emblematic of the broader controversy. While symbolic moments of respect captured headlines, the efficacy of long-term policy reforms remained in question. To understand the legacy of Trump's personal actions and policies toward people of color and veterans, it is essential to examine the narratives from both within the administration and among the communities affected. From the perspective of the Trump administration, many of the policies enacted during this period were defended on grounds of national security and economic prudence. White House press briefings consistently emphasized that decisions such as the travel ban, stricter immigration enforcement, and revised veteran care protocols were implemented to protect American citizens. In speeches and interviews, senior officials argued that every policy was crafted within the bounds of constitutional rights and national interest. A recurring argument was that these measures were not discriminatory on intent, but were instead necessary responses to the threats facing the nation. In contrast, community leaders, activists, and many members of the media painted a different picture. Accounts from ethnic minority groups detailed personal indignities, instances of being singled out or facing bureaucratic hurdles that were seen as reminiscent of former eras of exclusion. For many, the symbolic gestures by the president were insufficient, if not hypocritical, when measured against policies that they believed disenfranchised their communities. Researchers and commentators noted that despite claims of enhanced security and national pride, the policies often institutionalized inequities. On the subject of veterans, the divide was similarly stark. Proponents of the administration claimed that initiatives like improved veteran entrepreneurship programs and enhanced public recognition were steps in the right direction. Many conservative media outlets underscored the president's personal engagement with military personnel as evidence of respect for the country's heroes. However, numerous voices among veterans and their advocates stressed that while ceremonial honors were important, tangible improvements in access to health care and streamlining of the benefit system were long overdue. The multiplicity of narratives regarding the treatment of veterans underscored the complexity of reconciling symbolic politics with the bureaucratic realities of government administration. Scholars analyzing this period later argued that the Trump administration's legacy concerning minority and veteran policy would be defined not solely by its official pronouncements, but by the everyday experiences of those it touched. In academic journals and think tank reports, objective analyses drawn from statistical data and case studies revealed that while some gains were made publicly, many systemic issues persistently undermined the promise of inclusive governance. Observers from both mainstream media and independent research institutions noted that the Trump era was remarkable for its emphasis on personal rhetoric. Direct tweets and public statements by Trump often set the tone, which then influenced press coverage and public sentiment. This interplay of communication and policy created an environment in which narrative and substance were sometimes at odds. For those studying the period retrospectively, the apparent contradictions between high-profile gestures of support and the operational realities of government reform provided a fertile ground for debate. As the presidential term neared its conclusion in early 2021, the legacy of the Trump administration's interactions with people of color and veterans was being hotly debated. The 2020 election, conducted in the shadow of a global pandemic and widespread civil unrest, forced a renewed public reflection on the policies that had defined this polarizing era. In the final months of his term, Trump's actions continued to evoke mixed responses. On one hand, his supporters celebrated his unapologetic stance and his commitment to a vision of national strength encapsulated in measures like stricter immigration policies. On the other, critics pointed to policy failures and personal behaviors that, they argued, deepened societal cleavages. For people of color who had long faced the daily realities of systemic disadvantage, the administration's policies were seen by many as a continuation of historical patterns, a reluctance to fully embrace the promise of equal opportunity. For veterans, the transition period was marked by a sense of cautious optimism tempered by skepticism. In a series of final public engagements, Trump reiterated his commitment to honoring the service and sacrifice of military personnel. Official statements from the White House highlighted that certain reforms in the VA system were on track to improve organizational efficiency. Yet investigative pieces published even after Trump left office questioned whether these measures would be sufficient to address the deep-rooted issues identified over the years. As the incoming administration began to formulate its own policies, the legacy of the Trump presidency was already permeating national debates, compelling leaders to navigate the complexities of inherited challenges. Political analysts remarked that the pattern of personalized leadership, characterized by symbolic gestures that sometimes masked inconsistencies in policy, would have long-lasting repercussions on how political commitment to minority rights and veteran care was measured in future administrations, highlighting the importance of learning from past mistakes to forge a more cohesive policy approach. Looking back at the 4 years of the Trump presidency, The relationship between the administration and the communities of people of color and veterans remains a subject of vigorous debate. For supporters, Trump's policies were seen as a necessary recalibration of American priorities, a stance that prioritized national security and traditional American values in the face of changing global dynamics. For detractors, however, the administration's approach reinforced historical patterns of exclusion and neglect. Over time, it became evident that personal gestures, whether in the form of public ceremonies for veterans or pointed social media posts about border security, could not fully offset the repercussions of policies that many argued were inherently discriminatory. Many academic studies published later analyzed data concerning immigration, crime statistics, and veteran health outcomes. These studies, drawing on governmental reports and independent research, indicated that while the Trump administration's policies boosted a sense of nationalistic pride among certain groups, they also led to unintended consequences, ranging from heightened community tensions to bureaucratic hurdles that left vulnerable populations struggling to have their voices heard. Community organizations, civil rights groups, and veterans advocacy movements have since used the Trump era as a lens through which to examine broader themes of accountability and systemic reform. Public forums in cities across the United States discussed whether the dramatic rhetoric of 2017-2021 might have set the stage for both progressive activism and conservative retrenchment. In these discussions, mainstream news outlets like The Guardian and Politico offered in-depth retrospectives that explored the multifaceted impact of the administration's policies. One recurring theme in these reflections was the notion of personal responsibility versus institutional accountability. While Trump's personal style, marked by direct, sometimes confrontational communication, garnered undeniable support among his base, it also at times obscured the need for comprehensive policy solutions that addressed entrenched inequalities. For people of color, the story of the Trump years is inseparable from the broader narrative of a country grappling with its past and striving for a more inclusive future. For veterans, the conflicting images of honor and operational dysfunction continue to fuel calls for deeper reform in government agencies responsible for their welfare. The narrative of Donald Trump's presidency, as seen through the lens of his treatment of people of color and veterans, is one of layered complexities. It is a story that juxtaposes grand gestures with systemic shortcomings, eloquent proclamations with policy decisions that elicited both praise and protest. From the early days of the controversial travel ban to the myriad public appearances honoring veterans, Trump's four-year tenure was a period of dramatic contrasts. For many, the actions and declarations from 2017 to 2021 will serve as a case study in the power of rhetoric and the limits of symbolic politics. Mainstream news sources and official communications from the White House underscore that the controversies surrounding Trump's approach were not confined to isolated incidents, but were part of an ongoing debate about what it means to be inclusive in a diverse society. The treatment of people of color in the context of immigration and security policies, and the administration's efforts toward veteran recognition against a backdrop of systemic challenges, offer lessons that remain highly relevant to contemporary political discourse. Ultimately, this narrative is not meant to provide an unequivocal judgment, but rather a balanced account reflective of diverse sources and multifaceted perspectives. It is a story that reminds us of the enduring importance of examining policies not only through the words of those in power, but also through the everyday experiences of the people affected. As America continues its journey toward reconciliation with its past and toward forging a more inclusive future, the legacy of this contentious period stands as a testament to the need for accountability, empathy, and thoughtful policymaking. In the end, the Trump administration's legacy regarding its treatment of people of color and veterans remains a cautionary tale, a narrative shaped by the interplay of powerful rhetoric, policy decisions, and the resilient spirit of communities determined to claim their rightful place in the nation's ongoing story. It is a narrative that will be studied, debated, and remembered as a complex chapter in the history of American governance. The narrative above draws on a diverse range of sources, including mainstream news outlets such as the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, Reuters, and The Guardian, official White House press releases and public statements delivered throughout the Trump presidency, investigative reports from veteran advocacy groups and military publications, Academic studies and analytical think tank reports examining policy impacts from 2017 to 2021, these references reflect efforts to present an objective and balanced account of the events that shaped the presidency's approach to issues of race and veteran affairs. By weaving together diverse narratives and firsthand accounts, these references strive to illuminate the complex interplay between policy and public perception during pivotal moments in American history. Key milestones such as the Civil Rights Movement and the post-war integration of veterans provide context for understanding how previous administrations approached these sensitive topics. Moreover, the examination of historical documents, speeches, and legislative actions offers valuable insights into the motivations behind specific decisions. As leaders grappled with the socio-political climate, their responses often reflected both a commitment to justice and a struggle against long-standing prejudices. This tension invites deeper reflection on the evolution of national policies concerning race and how they align or clash with veteran affairs. Additionally, it is crucial to analyze the discourse surrounding these issues in contemporary settings. Current movements advocating for racial equality and fair treatment for veterans echo historic struggles and highlight the importance of learning from past mistakes. Engaging with this historical perspective can empower today's advocates to promote informed changes that honor both the sacrifices of veterans and the rights of marginalized communities. As new challenges arise, such as climate change, economic disparities, and social justice demands, the lessons drawn from these historical accounts can guide future administrations in crafting policies that are not only equitable, but also inclusive. It is imperative to remain vigilant and ensure that the legacy of these struggles informs ongoing debates about race, equity, and the responsibilities owed to those who have served the nation. The narrative of the Trump administration's four-year period is emblematic of a broader national debate on identity, security, and the meaning of citizenship. It challenges future policymakers and citizens alike to reflect on how personal conduct, symbolic actions, and official policy can converge to create an enduring legacy, one that, in its complexity, forces us to acknowledge the profound responsibilities that come with leading a nation as diverse and dynamic as the United States. As historians and political analysts continue to sift through the events of 2017-2021, the lessons learned from this period will serve as vital guideposts in the ongoing effort to build a society that recognizes and honors the contributions of people from every background, and that ensures every veteran receives the care and respect they deserve. The intricacies of these policies and gestures, as chronicled in this narrative, stand as testimony to the enduring challenge of reconciling vision with reality in American governance. With each unfolding chapter in America's future, the debates ignited during this period will continue to influence not only policymaking, but also the cultural and moral dialogue about inclusion, equity, and the way forward for a nation steeped in both promise and contradiction. This narrative acknowledges the diverse voices of those who have spoken out throughout this transformative period in America's history. Influential journalists have brought compelling stories to light, shedding light on societal challenges and triumphs alike. Community organizers, often the heartbeat of grassroots movements, have mobilized citizens around shared causes, advocating for change that resonates at the local level. Veteran advocates with their deep-rooted experiences have provided context and urgency to the calls for reform, reminding us of the sacrifices made and the stakes of inaction. Policy experts have lent their analytical skills to dissect complex issues, guiding us through intricacies that often perplex the public. Together, these voices weave a rich tapestry of perspectives that not only enrich this account, but also infuse it with the human experience at its core, showcasing resilience, hope, and the unwavering pursuit of a more inclusive and equitable society. The narrative presented above is meticulously crafted by an independent observer of American political history, who immerses themselves in a wealth of publicly available resources, objective news reports, and official communications. This comprehensive approach allows for a nuanced exploration of the myriad factors that influence the political landscape during this pivotal era. Its purpose is not merely to document events, but to provide an insightful and in-depth account that encapsulates the complexities and contradictions of a time marked by rapid change and significant societal challenges. By weaving together these diverse threads of information, the narrative invites readers to engage thoughtfully with the material, igniting discussions that will undoubtedly endure and provoke reflection for years to come. This exploration aims to illuminate not just the historical facts, but the emotional and personal stories that underscore the impact of political decisions on the fabric of everyday lives, ultimately energizing the ongoing discourse around equity, justice, and the pursuit of a shared future. As this narrative comes to a close, it invites readers to critically reflect on how the policies and personal gestures of a single presidential term have shaped and will continue to shape the lived experiences of those who are often caught between the aspirations of leadership and the demands of everyday life. Ultimately, while the Trump administration's tenure may be viewed through many disparate lenses, the enduring truth remains. The interplay between identity, policy, and personal action is a defining feature of any historical period, one that demands careful study, empathy, and a commitment to justice for all. As we reflect on this unique chapter in American history, it becomes increasingly evident that the lessons learned extend beyond the political sphere. Social movements, community responses, and individual actions emerge as vital components of the narrative, showcasing a populace engaged in a broader dialogue about values and priorities. Grassroots organizations mobilized, advocating for change in areas such as healthcare, education, and environmental justice, challenging not just existing policies but also societal norms. Moreover, the role of media, both traditional and social, transformed significantly during this period, shaping public perception and influencing the national discourse. An array of voices, often marginalized, gained unprecedented visibility, fueling advocacy through innovative campaigns and bringing urgency to long-standing issues. This shift underscored the necessity for critical media literacy, empowering citizens to discern fact from misinformation in an age where the flow of information is constant and often overwhelming. The impact of the pandemic further added complexity to the situational landscape, prompting reflections on leadership styles and their effectiveness in crisis management. As the nation grappled with profound loss and uncertainty, the call for unity and healing became paramount. The juxtaposition of divisive rhetoric with calls for compassion revealed a society grappling with its own identity, one striving to reconcile its ideals with its realities. In the wake of such a tumultuous period, the question remains, how will future generations interpret these events? Will they see a moment of profound division or a catalyst for transformative change? As educators, activists, and citizens, it is our responsibility to guide this discourse, ensuring that history is taught not only through the lens of political events, but also as a tapestry of human experiences and aspirations intertwined. The narrative of justice, equity, and resilience must be preserved, as it serves not only as a reminder of what has been endured, but also as a beacon for what can be achieved through collective effort and unwavering dedication.